3rd of April, and what a week for SA cricket. Huge Shield win, 29 years in the making. Welcome to Hooked on Sport, and welcome Ben Hook.
Incredible, Wallace. It has been one of the all-time weeks. I cannot believe I was there to witness it from ball one to the end of day 4. It has been such an incredible week, but an incredible 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, I have dealt with those people both on and off the field for a number of years now, and they live it, Wallace. You know, that is their life. And whether you work in the finance department or the local cricket department or the events department or the communications department, whatever it is, you live, your career is driven by whether your cricket team's winning. It's unusual. And for those people who've worked in communications, I mean, they're white-knuckled. They live whether the team wins or loses. And because they have been perennially strugglers, you can just see the tension on those people who really rely on the pleasance of their work being driven by whether the team's winning or losing. So for the fact that they've won not only the One Day Cup, but now the Sheffield Shield as well, and to see the smiles on all the faces of the support staff that I'm referring to, it's so richly deserved for all of these people who have been putting in so much and just hoping that the team can come along with them, and now they have.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. And the bowling was brilliant as well. Doggett, 11 wickets.
Yeah, so 11 for 140, 5 for 31, 6 for 31 in the first innings, 509 in the second innings. And it got tough in the second innings. And that's the other thing that stood out to me. It was late on day 3, and the South Australian attack, with absolutely nothing in the wicket, is flagging a little bit against some resistance from the Queensland middle order. And the vocals coming from the crowd was really quite something. You could tell that there were people in the crowd who felt like it was their responsibility to help the team in that time.
Wonderful.
Righto, we have a period here where clearly it is tough for a bowling team, and we are going to just going to try and carry them a little bit. Now, you know, some vocals from over the boundary line might mean a half of 1%, but it's still half of 1%. Yeah. And whether that had a material effect, I don't know, but it was just wonderful not to just see these South Australian fans turn up and support because we're in a final, but to really feel like they had to invest themselves in the match when South Australia was on a bit of a knife edge. Loved it. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, and what was it like being there with the crowd running on after the victory?
Yeah, special. Knew it was coming. You could just see the way the crowd had built. Here's an interesting one, Wallace. The game had actually been won, or the Sheffield Shield had actually been won the ball before. So South Australia, as the host, and then having scored more bonus points, if that game finished in a tie, they would have won. And the previous ball, the last ball of the previous over, was hit by Ben Manenti through cover for 4, which tied the scores. There was no physical way we could have lost. I'm just kind of glad in a way that the crowd didn't really work that out and allowed Jason Sanger to hit those winning runs the next ball, because, yeah, there are people involved in cricket who knew full well that was it. The match was done at that particular point in time. They could have wandered off and shook hands and that was it. But, yeah, that was quite the moment, wasn't it? And just to see the players wanting to celebrate, but then realising, actually, we've got 5,000 people who want to celebrate with us. And Wallace, you're probably aware, the presentations were supposed to happen on the ground.
I did see it set up for the ground, yes.
and we were expecting maybe, I don't know, a circle of about 150, 200 people who might have made their way on. And then we've got 7,000. Okay, what do we do? And yeah, we very hastily I didn't make the decision, but I was obviously a part of the presentations. Right, let's go upstairs, which was excellent, except the audio was a real problem. So I get the feeling that the speakers that were around the pavilion had been isolated for whatever reason, and I couldn't hear myself talk. No one even alongside of me could hear because the crowd was so raucous, and the crowd couldn't hear either. So in the end, all the players lifted the Sheffield Shield, and that's what matters. But we had some technical issues on the way through.
Yes. Now, you've got a special guest for the second half of this episode.
Yeah, we will talk thoroughly about the Sheffield Shield final. So if you're tuning in and you want to hear my thoughts on the Sheffield Shield, well, you get a little bit of that, but you're going to get a lot of the unbelievable Bharat Sundaresan, who is Alongside Laurie Colliver, and I might have made this point, we've already had the chat, Wallace. It actually was a couple of days ago. But alongside Laurie Colliver, I think Bharat Sundaresan is the foremost expert on all things cricket inside and outside of South Australia. I might have a little bit of cover on them with Premier cricket and local cricket, but certainly South Australia through to Australia and international stuff. Bharat and Laurie, yeah, it would be Bone Crusher versus our Waverley Star. So that's how good they both are. And Bharat, so generous with his time. It's an extensive chat, and his thoughts on the Sheffield Shield final, the Sheffield Shield, South Australian cricket is fascinating. So I encourage you to stick around and listen to all of what Bharat has to offer.
Yeah, very insightful. Now we have some more exciting news that RunDNA have come on board to support the podcast.
Yeah, we are so excited about this, Wallace. RunDNA, talk about Bharat being foremost in cricket alongside Laurie. Well, RunDNA, if you are interested in any sort of exercise, this is the only organisation that you can trust to get your shoe fitting absolutely right. I have been a devotee of RunDNA back in its previous days of Joggers World and Fortitude. It's now RunDNA, and that is a perfect example of what it is. It actually understands your DNA of how you run, and then therefore has the scientific backing to find out which shoes are actually going to suit you. I'll just explain it like this, Wallace. I was a devotee of Asics Kayano, and it wouldn't even matter. I would just, every year, I get a new pair of the Kayanos at Asics, right? And it was Josh Willoughby at RunDNA who was the one explained to me, hey, look, that's all well and good, but Kayano might be the perfect shoe for you this year, but they will change the structure of the shoe the next year and the year after and the year after. And so every time I buy a new pair of shoes from RunDNA, I get it fitted out so that I know full well that it is absolutely the most modern, up-to-date, perfect strike, landing, release for my particular structure. You can buy shoes online. Good luck. That's fine. And you're going to get good pairs of shoes because there's plenty of good pairs of shoes around. But to get the ideal pair for you, there's only one option, and that's you go in and you see RunDNA, you see the team in there, they put you on their treadmill with all of their tracking, and that is the way you will determine that is the absolute best shoe for you. And we all want to run, whether you're a good runner like, a Jess Stenson or an Izzy Bat Doyle, or if you're an absolute hacker like me who just likes going for long, fairly slow runs, we all want to run as best as we possibly can. There's only one way to do it, Wallace, and that's go in and see the team at RunDNA and get fitted for the right pair of shoes for you.
So whether you're walking or running, RunDNA. So Hookie, MCG tonight, Thursday night footy. What are your thoughts?
Look, at Thursday night football, I love it. I love being able to sit in front of the TV on a Thursday night. I'm going to put something on watch, though, Wallace, and that is Thursday night football in Victoria. I think we have some serious question marks about it. The crowd, this fixture last year, Carlton versus Collingwood, was a Friday night, and that game attracted 88,362 people. That was in round 9. It's a pretty cool part of the year. I'll be stunned if they get anywhere near that tonight. I think it's going to be maybe just a tad over 70. And I think the only difference is the difference between Friday night football in Melbourne and Thursday night football in Melbourne. This piqued my interest a couple of weeks ago when Essendon played Port Adelaide on a Thursday night. It was at Marvel Stadium, and 25,000 people were there. 25,000. Essendon, one of the great clubs of VFL/AFL football. Only 25,000 people have turned up for a Thursday night game. And this is where I started to think, okay, let me have a look at this. In 2023, the corresponding fixture, there was 38,000 people for the Essendon home game against Port Adelaide. Now, at the MCG, but you can't tell me that 13,000 people didn't turn up because it was at Marvel as compared to the MCG. That's what just raised the flag for me. And I just want to take you through a couple more. Richmond Carlton, we all know that they get the plum Thursday night opener to the season. Now, I know the opener to the season has been compromised a little bit because we've had opening round up there in the northern states. But from the Victorian perspective, Richmond and Carlton get the absolute handout of opening the season on a Thursday night. Now, you can get me started on the amount of handouts that the Victorian clubs do get, because they get Anzac Day, they get the night before Anzac Day, they get Easter Monday, they get the Queen's birthday Monday. All of those are the purview of Victorian team versus Victorian team. You know, I think it's outrageous, but that's probably a story for another time. Richmond Carlton in 2023, 88,000. In 2024, 83,000. In 2025, 80,000. That is on a trajectory downwards in crowds like we are not seeing on any other night. Can I take you to Carlton versus Geelong? It was at the MCG in 2023 on a Thursday night. 55,000 people turned up. The following year, Carlton versus Geelong, also at the MCG, 87,000 people turned up. Why are they not turning up on a Thursday night? Western Bulldogs versus the Lions. In 2023 on a Thursday night, that was 23,600. In 2024, on the Friday night, there was 31,000 people for the same corresponding fixture. 7,000 the difference. You know, we're talking about a fifth of the crowd, 20%. Here's another interesting one. In 2023, round 15 at Kardinia Park, Geelong hosted Melbourne. There was 19,617 there. If I take you back to 2023, Geelong and Melbourne were two of the absolute big clubs. Now, that was during the redevelopment at Kardinia Park. 19,600 there. They averaged that year 21,500, and they get some fairly ordinary fixtures outside of that. So the standalone Thursday night fixture was well under average. And here's one more that I'll give you. In round 17, Richmond played Sydney. In 2023, that crowd, Thursday night, was 48,400. Now, I want to compare that to the 45,000 that attended at 4 p.m. on Easter Sunday, but of those same two teams at the same ground, the MCG. Now, I mean, can you believe there's only 3,000 more people that turned up for a standalone Thursday night fixture as they did for Easter Sunday afternoon game at the MCG when everyone's going away? So if you take all of that into account, I think we have a massive problem in Melbourne with people turning up to Thursday night football. I understand that it's a challenge. You've got to get kids from school, get to the ground, you've still got to be at work the next day. But that has been a time slot that has been very, very successful outside of the Victorian border. South Australia here has embraced it. We've seen it go well in Sydney. We've seen it go well in Brisbane. I would make the point, I want to keep this on watch, but I would suggest that if we are going to use this as a standalone time slot for AFL football, it needs to go to the emerging markets. This needs to be where Gold Coast plays its own standalone, free-to-wear, exclusive match. This should be GWS. This should be Brisbane. This should be Port Adelaide. This should be, I mean, Fremantle. It's very difficult because this game goes on TV. There'll be two games in Perth this year that'll start at 7:40 our time. That's 6:10 Western Australian time. That's pretty tough to get people to the football in time. Here's the other challenge about it, Wallace. It does create transport issues because here in South Australia, we have an arrangement that public transport gets people in and out of Adelaide Oval. So the public transport probably finishes at around about 11 o'clock. All of these bus drivers and tram drivers, et cetera, have got to be back at work at 5 o'clock the next morning to start the Friday run, which you don't really have any other day. So lots of challenges. I think the TV numbers are always going to be good, but yeah, I've got a real watch on Melbourne as supposing the sporting capital of the world. Are they really going to turn up for Thursday night footy?
Beautiful segue into the changes that are being predicted for the AFL season in 2026 hockey.
Yes, this was released by Channel 9 on Monday night, I think it was, with a suggestion that the competition should start probably early April and finish in the middle of October. So this would allow the possibility of accommodating some international rules and some state of origin football, which would be part of the pre-season arrangements. So I'm looking at the dates that they've given to me, October 10 as a potential 2026 grand final, and therefore October 2, 3 and 4 as a potential preliminary final. So the grand final is always going to be at the MCG. We know that deal's done. So if you suggest that's October 10, you'd probably have a Friday night and a Saturday afternoon, October 3 preliminary finals. Remarkable, isn't it, that the AFL deemed it impossible to host a Sheffield Shield final at Adelaide Oval and jumped up and down that this was football season and the safety of the players was paramount. But we're probably going to see now a push from the AFL to edge into cricket season in those early parts of October. Sheffield Shield is well and truly underway. The One Day Cup is well and truly underway. And I imagine they're going to say, well, I know it's cricket season, but we feel like that this is going to become our time slot and unilaterally try and shift in on it. Cricket Australia needs to make a move pretty quickly here. I'd start to think about how they schedule. They've got the 25-26 season still to come up, but I imagine for 26-27, you would be scheduling a heck of a lot of cricket right now to be in the early parts of October on all of the AFL grounds and cut a deal with the AFL. If you want us to move off, well, there's going to be a significant price to pay, because that's certainly what I'd be doing, having got no free kicks whatsoever from the AFL. Make it as financially difficult as possible for the AFL to jump in on your own territory.
Okay, Hilky, can you give us an update on the grand finals of the Premier Cricket from last weekend?
2 divisions, couple of great games. Let me start with Division 1, which was Tea Tree Gully taking on Kensington at Woodville Oval. Absolute thriller of a game, Wallace. Kensington looked in all sorts of trouble at 8 for about 145, ended up eking out 222, and then have bowled Tea Tree Gully out for 220. Cameron Thatchin bowled beautifully, took 2 for 30, was the David Hooks medalist as the best player on the field. But the bloke who took the last wicket, Lloyd Pope, probably the cult hero of South Australian cricket at the moment, was unlucky to miss the Sheffield Shield final, got the consolation prize of playing for Kensington in the club final, was brought back into the attack with Tea Tree Gully 9 down. Thatchin was the guy who was bowling. I thought it was a brave move to take Thatchin out of the attack and bring Pope in. Evan Gregoric was on strike. He picked up a couple of runs and then played a pull shot to a shorter ball off Pope, which instead of going for 4, went straight to the guy at mid-wicket. And Kensington, as they did in the women, from seemingly out of nowhere, have hung on to 1, and they've done the double once again. So, yeah, incredible club, Kensington, and superb result for them. In Division 2, it was East Torrens taking on Woodville. Similar sort of game, really. East Torrens have batted really well to post a score in excess of 300. It left Woodville only 76 overs, I think it was, to chase down the total. They were doing really well. They were scoring quite nicely, but then started to lose a couple of wickets, and the pressure just got to them. And in the end, I think they lost something like 5 for about the last 35. I'm just guessing that. So if anyone's going to query me, that's fine. But yeah, Woodville looked for everything like they were a possibility of chasing down what was a very impressive target set by East Torrens. And the Reds have held on. Both East Torrens and Woodville now go back up into Division 1. Coming down to Division 2 next year is Adelaide University, who really did struggle this year. They didn't have a good year. The other one that's interesting is Glenelg. They were in the grand final the year before. 6 of their players are in the South Australian team. 5 of them are in the Sheffield Shield team. So that's going to be a little bit jarring when you see Nathan McSweeney and Brendan Doggett and Harry Conway and Connor McInerney and Alex Carey even potentially playing in Division 2 cricket next year. That is a bit of an eye-opener. And I mean, people are always going to grizzle about, is it right to be 1 or 2 divisions? The one thing I will say about this plan is we're seeing a lot more meaningful cricket being played at Premier level. So back in my day, there was 13 teams and only 4 spots in the finals, and you could be 9th versus 11th, and it could be as early as late January, early February. And that game kind of didn't have a lot of meaning to it. You just played it out because you played cricket, but neither team was a chance of making the 4. And so you had from late January through to middle of March, games that were just kind of meaningless. And at least these games have got some meaning now, because there was a period of time where not only were you trying to make finals, you were trying to avoid relegation if you're in Division 1. So now, is it just coincidence that it's coincided? This is the second year of the competition. It's coincided with South Australia becoming the dominant state. I think that probably is more coincidence than anything, but it would be impossible, even for those clubs who don't love the 2 divisions, it's going to be impossible right now to scrap it, because clearly it has been part of what has developed into a wonderful South Australian cricket culture right now.
And the Saka under-19 team played Division 2, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And they're an interesting story because they can win the premiership and not go up into Division 1. They'll remain in Division 2. So once we had our 3 teams, we knew straight away who was going up into Division 1, even though Saka under-19s could have won the lot. So there is some interchange between the Saka under-19s and the clubs, and in particular, so a kid like Thomas Brown, I think he might be from Kensington. Gee, I hope I've got that right. And no, or was he Port Adelaide? Anyway, wherever Thomas Brown is from, he'll be playing in the 2-day competition for Sacca under-19s, and then he'll go back and play for his club in the 1-dayers and the T20. So that's kind of the structure of it. And then, of course, once he's no longer eligible for under-19s, he returns to his club. But they've been impressive. I think they finished second this year and then lost to Woodville in the preliminary final, if you like. But they've certainly added something to the competition. So in that Division 2 anyway.
Yeah, so you got those lads who'll end up potentially playing against national and state players in Div 2.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen, Wallace. I mean, you don't see Alex Carey play a lot of club cricket anymore, of course, and not even first-class cricketers play a heck of a lot. But, gee, there'll be a tough team if all the state players are available. Glenelg playing, say, Southern District in Division 2. That would be that'll be pretty frightening, won't it?
Great opportunity for them. Now let's move on to the semi-finals for the Pennant Golf, which are on this weekend.
Very, very exciting. It's the Big Four once again. The Vines have been the club that have come out of the woods from Division 2 and been very, very successful. Made 2 finals in the last 4 years, but we're back to the Big Four, the Tier 1 clubs, who'll face each other off in the Simpson Cup this year. So Kooyonga plays the Grange, first versus fourth, in one semi-final. This will be played at the Vines. And Glenelg will play Royal Adelaide. So what have we got? Kooyonga, they've won the last 3, I think it is, and they've dominated again. They've won every contest that they've had this year. So they're 7 from 7. They'll take on the Grange, who have been, a very, very strong club in their own right this year. The Grange seems to have, how would I say, their team seems to be a little bit more fluid. They seem to make more changes over the course of a year. The Kooyonga team, let's just have a quick look at it. I'll give you some names. Kyle Hayter at the top, Freddie Castle, Heath Riches has been, well, we've had him on the show. He's been one of the stars. Malachi Marshall is an incredible story. This kid would be 17, 18. He might be, I reckon he'd weigh 60 kilos. Tiny little fella, doesn't hit it super far, but he's won 6 and halved one of his 7 matches this year, 6.5 from 7, being the best player in the competition. Jordan Percy is another one who's had an incredible year. Jackson Cowles, and then Jeff Brennan. Jeff would be mid-late 40s, I reckon. Doesn't play every week. Generally just plays if they don't have a full complement of their younger guys. And I think he's won 5 of his 7 matches this year, or 5 of his 6 matches, because I reckon he missed one altogether. So, yeah, they're an incredible club. Their depth is amazing, Kooyonga. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they... Well, I expect them probably to beat the Grange just because of their depth. And then the other match is Glenelg versus Royal Adelaide. Glenelg have finished the season particularly well. They beat the Vines on the weekend. They beat Thaxted Park pretty comfortably the week before that. And they've beaten Tea Tree Gully recently as well. So this is another club with a fair bit of depth. I'll just give you a couple of names that I'll wheel through as well. Kay Bryant, maybe the best young player in South Australia playing amateur golf right now. He's a remarkable talent. He'd be under 20, I'm pretty sure, Cade. He's very exciting. Another small guy, doesn't hit it super far, but my word, he's accurate. Josh Hayes has had a wonderful year. Michael Munn's an incredible story. Played a lot of district cricket, just got into his golf, and he has been a real contributor to that team as well. And Nick Wake is the senior, he's the South Australian Senior Order of Merit champion, who's down there playing Simpson Cup against the young kids and holding his own as well. So, what do I think? I have the feeling that it's probably going to be Kooyonga that gets past Grange. Glenelg and Royal Adelaide will be really, really tight. I probably think pound for pound, Glenelg maybe just. Royal Adelaide started the year absolutely superbly. They've just wobbled a little bit in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I'll go for Glenelg only just, but I think they'll be cracking matches. Played at the Vines as well. Probably suits Glenelg a little bit better than Royal Adelaide. I think that's probably why I'll just lean towards Glenelg. But a couple of massive matches. And then do you want to touch on Sanderson Cup as well?
100%.
So this is the matchup of the same 4 teams. Royal Adelaide takes on Glenelg, second and third. The Grange and Kooyonga will take each other on. The only difference, Wallace, is the Grange have been by far and away the most dominant team of this year with 3.5 wins from their 4 contests. I have a funny feeling, though, that Kooyonga can win it from here, from 4th position, fourth of 5, and might go on and win the title. We do have a situation where the Australian Junior Amateur is on this week in Queensland, and that's going to have an adverse effect on the way some teams are going to have to be selected. I think probably the most heavily hit will be Royal Adelaide, who lose one, maybe even two players of their five. So that's going to mean some significant changes to their lineup. Kooyonga, I think, will be pretty steady through all of that. They have lost Imogen Jessen, who's gone to college this year, so she has been a big loss for them. But Matilda Miles has played very well through the middle. They have looked very, very strong later in the year. They actually beat Royal Adelaide in the second last round of the year before they had their bye at the end. They had a comfortable win over Blackwood. Emily Giotis, Rachel Fry, a very experienced player, and Mia Louie, who we haven't really seen a lot of Rachel Fry in recent years. She's come back in and been very, very successful. Mia Louie, a young player who has had a really good first year in the competition. Then Matilda Miles, Emily Giotis, Jamie Hards round out their lineup. So, it'll be... anything can happen, Wallace, as you understand, but Kooyonga might have enough to get past the Grange, who I think will lose at least Amelia Winnie in the semi-final, because she'll go off and I think she'll be involved. Oh, no, it's not Amelia Winner, I beg your pardon, but they've got Stephanie Keylock and Lucy Keylock, two sisters, who I think might be going to this junior amateur as well. So they'll have potentially some big changes to their team. So
where are they playing?
Press me. I'm gonna select that Glenelg will probably beat Royal Adelaide. It's in Queensland. I'm not exactly sure where it is, Wallace, but it is somewhere.
Where's the Sanderson Cup being played?
Sanderson Cup is at Grange. So it will be a home game for Grange. And then I think all of the finals are at Royal Adelaide the week after. So I'm going to go Glenelg to beat Royal Adelaide, just really on the strength of the fact that I think Royal Adelaide will be missing one or two. And I would say Kooyonga in a bit of a turn-up to beat the Grange on their home deck, just on the basis of the fact that I think they will be least compromised by players off to the Australian Junior Amateur.
In the Adelaide Softball Association Premier League Grand Final, the Walkerville Cats were successful over the Seacombe Tigers 4-0. Star American pitcher Taylor Caudle won Player of the Grand Final and then backed it up the next night, winning the association's Player of the Year award, the Kath Corral Medal. After the break, Ben catches up with Bharat Sundaresan to recap SA's Sheffield Shield final win.
We are thrilled to announce RunDNA as a supporter of the Hooked on Sport podcast. RunDNA has an incredible range of running and walking footwear, apparel and accessories, catering for anyone who is looking for the right shoe and fit. And that is one thing they do better than anyone, is find the right shoe that works for you. They're trusted by podiatrists and physiotherapists right across Adelaide. The RunDNA fitter's advice is second to none. So if it's time for new walkers or runners, you can find RunDNA. They're so convenient. One location, 20 Manton Street, Hindmarsh, or the other location, 391 Fullarton Road at Fullarton. Both stores open 7 days a week, plenty of off-street parking. It's so easy. Drive into their car park. It's a 10-metre walk, and you're in with the most wonderful, friendly, and intelligent staff. You can find them online as well, rundna.com.au. If you run or walk, then you need to run DNA. Well, what an amazing couple of weeks it has been for South Australian cricket. Of course, just a month ago, they took out the one-day title, the first ever winners of the Dean Jones Trophy. And then this week, the ultimate happened. After 29 years, South Australia took out the Sheffield Shield. It was exciting for everyone who was there, every South Australian who has ever been passionate about their cricket. And there was certainly plenty of passion at Karen Rolton Oval on Saturday afternoon. To dissect it all is undoubtedly the foremost expert on cricket here in South Australia. He's been so good enough to join us. Bharat Sundaresan, welcome to Hooked on Sport.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, it took them 29 years to win the Shield. I thought it'll take that long for you to get me on your show, to be honest. So it's been a long wait. But and the most important thing you forgot in that introduction was you're also one of my oldest friends in Adelaide. Don't forget, Hookie. So yes. Unless you moved on from that, so our connection runs much deeper than that. Yeah, no, well, we'll touch on that very briefly. Peter Walsh got in contact with me and said there's this
Indian cricket journalist who was just moved to Adelaide, and someone needs to have a chat to him. And I thought, well, hey, I'm going to ring him and say good day. We met for a coffee on the parade. I thought we'd chat for 15 minutes. We chatted for about 2 hours, and our respective wives have become friends ever since. So, yeah, here we are. Even if we didn't like each other, we'd have to learn to like each other because our wives are good mates.
Exactly. And this is even before the baby and the dogs have met. And then we have no option at all. No, it's yeah. And we've been on this ride together, haven't we, in our own way. Hookie, obviously for you, South Australian cricket means so much more. You've been an actual part of it. You donned the cap. But just even, speaking to you about how much people of the state and the city care about this team and how much you care about it has been part of my learning to get a better understanding of why what transpired on Saturday evening meant so much to so many people.
You've been here long enough, though, Bharat, that you understand the passion that South Australians have for cricket and the deep sense of frustration that the fans have had with the ongoing underperformance from this group that has just turned the corner 180 degrees with such a hurry in the last 7 months.
Very much so. I mean, we were just over 3 years away from, or 3 years removed from when one win meant so much to this team. You remember they'd been bottom dwellers for a couple of seasons and they hadn't won a game in nearly 2 years. And as it turned out, ironically, it was Nathan McSweeney who played a role in that win. He just kind of moved across from Queensland alongside his good mate Brendan Doggett, and those two played a huge role in getting them over the line. It was a run chase. It was slightly more dramatic than what this proved to be, purely in terms of them not being. Yes, 4-wicket victory, but a lot of those wickets fell in the end. So it was more like a 3 or 7-wicket win more than a 4-wicket win. However, even and I will digress as I always do, I did tell at least 4 separate members on the morning of day 4 that they'll win by 6 or they'll lose 6 wickets on their way to victory. Okay, I hope they put some money on it. They would have made a lot. But no, I think so. To come from there 3 years ago to kind of not just win the Shield but dominate the Shield. I mean, have double the number of wins as any other team. Have the best batting numbers, have the best bowling numbers, is just extraordinary. So, often we see when you talk about underdog stories in sport, when a team or an athlete has to come from the bottom, it's a slow climb. It feels like South Australia have just gone from there to there in the space of, like you said, 7 months.
Yeah. One of the stats that underlines your point, South Australia in Sheffield Shield cricket collectively scored 16 centuries this year. The team that ran second had 9. So that just underlines the dominance that South Australia had in their batting, which is just something that, yes, we have not seen anything like that from South Australian cricket in the last 10 to 15 years. We moved to Karen Rolton Oval. Everyone understands that we would have loved to have seen this at Adelaide Oval. It wasn't to be. What did you make of the spectacle of the venue, Bharat? Because I thought the SACA, the government and the council all did an incredible job.
Oh, I mean, I think they hit it out of the park. They won over South Australia before the team did. And when that whole debate was on about Adelaide Oval versus Karen Rolton Oval, I was quietly hoping, and I said it back then as well, I was quietly hoping that it is the Karen Rolton Oval, because as someone like you who's been to most Shield games that South Australia played in the last seven summers, you just knew that the Karen Rolton had become their home away from home. At the Adelaide Oval, yes, it's a historic home of cricket in Adelaide, but it almost felt like it was either pre-season or towards the end when AFL was about to take over. So all good things for South Australia happen often at the Karen Rolton Oval. They, like I said, even that win 3 years ago. So I wasn't too disappointed that it moved here. And now you know why. I mean, look, would we have had a couple more thousand people at the Adelaide Oval? Potentially. But it still would have been around 9,000-10,000 people. And even if, say, the crowd had stormed the Adelaide Oval the way they did the Karen Rolton Oval, it still would not have looked the same. So in a way, I think we got the best desired result in terms of just the atmosphere and the vibe, and even driving in to the Karen Rolton Oval, looking on that first morning of Port Road. Yeah, just the number of cars and the fact that Park 25 had been converted into a temporary car park, and to see it already full on a Wednesday morning, I thought, wow, we are on to something special. But obviously, what happened the last day, especially the last few hours, was extraordinary.
Yeah, your point's well made. I arrived at the ground on Wednesday morning at around about 9:15. I knew that I had to conduct the opening ceremony, if you like. It's not quite a ceremony, but it's a welcome to country, Australian national anthem, get the two teams and the umpires on the ground. And I was very, very relaxed about it. I thought, there'll be 50, 60 people at that particular point. And I got there at 9:15 and there was already a good 500-600 people there, which swelled to more than 1,200 before the first ball. The level of passion that it drove is pretty incredible. What did you make of the match? I mean, we've had a Sheffield Shield final here in Australia every year since 82, 83, except for one, the COVID year, when all sport was cancelled. It has been not universally loved, the Sheffield Shield final. I think you'd understand that. Mark Taylor was pretty vocal about suggesting maybe we don't need a Sheffield Shield final anymore. It was a classic match, though, Bharat. What did you make of this match in particular, juxtaposed against the queries around the merit of a Sheffield Shield final?
No, I mean, for anyone who's ever debated about whether there should be a final at the end of the Sheffield Shield season or not, just needed to see this game. And look, South Australia could have finished top, say 10 days before this final, when they drew against Queensland. That could technically have been the moment when they lift the shield. It just would not have felt the same, would it? And I think, especially when the Sheffield Shield itself is marketed as being probably the premier first-class competition in the world. I mean, even though the English will claim that it's county cricket with their 18 counties. And in India, the Ranji Trophy is something I covered a lot, watched a lot growing up. Since it's gone to 39-40 teams, you literally have to wait till the last bit to even get your head around who's still around. So the Sheffield Shield being what it is, I think you need a final. And you're right, this was a classic match. I mean, even if you just took out the nostalgia and the history attached with South Australia winning, the fact that the visiting team gets bowled out for 95 on the opening day. We saw a terrific 100 from Jake Lehman to give South Australia that lead. But then for Queensland to come literally from the dead. I mean, when Michael Neser got out on the cusp of the lunch break on day 3, we all thought, we were all making predictions. I told everyone the game will be over by 3:35 p.m. that day, because that's what it looked like. And then for the two Jacks, Clayton and Wildermuth, to do what they did, and Mark Steketee scoring runs as well, we went into day 4 not knowing which way this game would go. I thought it was 50-50. Queensland had given themselves the best chance despite the flatness of the pitch and it being the Karen Rolton Oval. The fact that South Australia had to break a record, which I realized Alex Carey wasn't aware of before I told him. And then I was very upset with myself for having put that extra bit of pressure on his head, though it scares, so he didn't bother too much, because we bumped into each other in the parking lot at the end of day 3. And then even for South Australia to then come back from 3 for 28 and then chase it down the way they did. And just the fact that they lost those 2-3 quick wickets towards the end, another 40-50 runs, who knows? We could have been in for a thriller with one day still left. No, I think it was a classic final. Like, I think people talk about, and it's like the 2019 World Cup final, to be honest, Toki. People talk about the 95-96 final, and I've heard so many interviews of players who were involved in it, and they talk about that having been one of the greatest matches they've been a part of. I think it had so much to do with that last day and the finish. It's like that 2019 50-over World Cup, right? I mean, we talk about the super over and all the drama, but I remember being there at Lord's on commentary. For the first 80 or so overs, there was a pretty dull game. Like, the pitch did nothing. It was so difficult to score for teams, for batters from both teams. It just then caught fire towards the end. Then it's spoken of as an all-time classic. But this in comparison to even what happened in 95-96. I might get buried for saying this, but maybe there's recency bias. But it just was an overall classic 5-day encounter, which, like most 5-day encounters these days, finished in 4 days.
It's such a beautiful point. And even the fact, Bharat, that this match finished at 5 o'clock or just before 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, it gave everybody the opportunity to be there. They'd seen the partnership building over the course of the day. And there are people telling me that in the last hour, the crowd built from 4,000 to 8,000. And had that game have drifted into day 5 and maybe finished at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, there wouldn't have been anything like that emotional outpouring. So, yeah, everything about it just landed on its feet from a South Australian audience perspective. Let's just break down the game a little bit. South Australia won the toss, bowled first. And for the first 20 minutes, I think there are a lot of people, certainly in the area that we were sitting, a lot of experts around us, Jason Gillespie there, Tim Nielsen there, Laurie Colliver, who knows a lot about first-class cricket. All of those guys sort of shaking their heads going, oh, it might have maybe been one of those tosses that if you win, you probably want to bat first and try and get some runs on the board. But after that, the South Australian bowling performance, as it has been all year, was just supreme.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even I didn't question the decision so much as I was taken by how nervous South Australia were. I mean, the new ball bowlers, McAndrew and Buckingham, and also the 2 dropped catches at slip. It's just nervy. And it took one delivery from Brendan Doggett to not just throw the game open, but almost for the nerves around the South Australian camp to settle down. Like, he gets rid of Usman Khawaja with that first ball. And when at a time when we were all thinking about, Usman Khawaja, like you don't drop him once, you've dropped him twice, he's definitely going to make you pay. And then he gets out the way he did, playing a shot which generally he's so good at playing. I think that really calmed everybody's nerves down. And then from there to go to 5 for 22, poor Jack Clayton running himself out of the first ball. And I remember I just got out of the commentary box and walked around to the other side of the hill. And that's also another moment when I realized, wow, this is going to be an exciting 3 or 4 days, because the crowd was so into it. There were people of all ages, of all genders, just people who had been there at the Adelaide Oval all those years ago, and people who had never seen South Australia in a final before. So that beautiful blend. And I think at 5 for 22 was an important juncture in the game, because I think it brought the crowd alive. And then, yeah, I mean, my man Michael Neser, like always, fought as a lone wolf. But who would have thought that Queensland, with their experience in that batting lineup, would be 95 all out on a pitch which I do not think kind of dictated that kind of scoreline. For me, and I spoke to a couple of the Queenslanders as well, it was like an early season New Zealand pitch, almost a Wellington-like pitch. It was sticky, it was moist, moisture underneath. So that played a role in it. But yeah, 16 wickets overall on day one was quite something.
Yeah, you mentioned 16 wickets on day one, 6 of those South Australians, and it looks like Queensland may have found a bowler in Callum Vidler. He is very, very exciting. And for an old guy like me, reminiscent of maybe 30 years ago, when one of Callum Vidler's teammates' dads, as a 19-year-old redhead, run in bowling pace for Queensland and then Australia.
Oh, absolutely. And I think and you've seen so many young tearaways in your time, Hookie, as a player, as a commentator, as just someone who's followed the sport so closely. But there's something about Vidler, even that first spell he bowled, the way he set up Henry Hunt and Nathan McSweeney, who are pretty seasoned first-class cricketers, and even for someone like him to bowl 3 maidens on the trot. And the control that he showed with the movement, despite being so quick. And for me, the most impressive part about Callum Vidler throughout that game was his action. It's so smooth. So often we see fast bowlers in Australia, whether it's Lance Morris or Jai Richardson, who you look at their bowling actions and you go, ugh, you kind of worry for them. And we've seen both those guys go through such long ruts with injury issues. So for this kid, just 19, as a couple of them said, he still has a boy's body. So Andy Bickle said that on commentary with us. So he'll grow into it, and there's a lot to look forward to with how far Callum Weidler can go at a time when the transition seems to be happening as well. I mean, earlier today, the central contracts were announced, and you can see there is a push for younger fast bowlers there. So he can't be too far away.
Day 2 was all about Jake Lehmann, who, I did the maths, just in March alone, in 4 games of cricket for South Australia, has scored 468 runs. For one of the great South Australian cricket punching bags, it has been an incredible rise to stardom, and I'm so pleased for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's taken it all. I don't know whether it's taken it in his stride or not, but he's always copped it, like you said. And I remember, was it last summer when Shamar Joseph played his first game on Australian soil at the Karen Rolton Oval, where else? And Jake Lehmann was doing commentary with us. It was his first time on commentary, and he was so nervous. Like I was, I had the pleasure of kind of holding his hand and guiding him into the commentary box. And I remember Darren Lehmann bumped into me probably in Brisbane after that, and he thanked me for it. And I told him, like, Jake, look, sounds pretty good on commentary, but he's still not done. He was still, 29, 30 at that point. And even again, this season didn't start very well. I guess so many things have happened in his career, right? I mean, being thrust with captaincy, and every time Travis Head and Alex Carey would go, he was just looked at as the mainstay. And batters, as you know better than anyone else, different batters mature at different ages, and he's still not that old. He's 31, isn't he? 31, 32. So I think he might be coming into his own at this stage, and nothing like, 4 centuries when it matters the most, and a century in a Shield final to set the game up the way he did. Because without that 100, I know they were 6 for 113. If he would have got out, or Queensland had managed to nick off a couple there, it could have been game on. And who knows, they might have been chasing a much, much bigger total in the 4th innings. So no, so happy for him. He's just such a self-effacing man as well. There's nothing really over the top with him. You can often find star sons, if you want to call him that, have a bit of air about them, but not this guy, and he's never had that. So, and you could see that, like when he was scoring those runs, everyone was willing him on. So I think as the season ended, Mitch Marsh famously said, didn't he, when I asked him at the Oval in 2019, he says, most of Australia hates me. Hopefully I'll win them over someday. Jake Lehmann didn't say that, but he could lay claim to that as well. But I think now South Australia, he doesn't divide opinions anymore. They are, head over heels in love with him.
Yeah, well, you and I were both at RunDNA yesterday. The biggest year clearly for Alex Carey, but certainly Jake Lehmann got his fair share of celebrations from the crowd. It's an interesting point you made. He was thrust into the captaincy, if you like, last year. It probably didn't sit well with him. Similarly for Henry Hunt a couple of years ago as the South Australian captain, which leads me to Nathan McSweeney, who just seems to me, Bharat, like a born leader. He led the Brisbane Heat to the BBL title last year. And then to take South Australia in his first year as captain. Everyone's talked about Ryan Harris as being a first-year coach. But Nathan, in his first year as captain of South Australia, to lead them to the one-day title, to the Sheffield Shield title, and playing Test cricket for Australia in and amongst all of it, captaincy and leadership in general seems to sit very, very well with Nathan McSweeney.
And he's been earmarked as a leader from a pretty young age. But just on the fact that he's done that in the space of just over 12 months. He's won the 3 titles there are to be won in men's cricket, men's domestic cricket in Australia across 3 formats. Kind of tells you why all those people who thought he was a born leader are right. And I remember interviewing Brendan Doggett at the start of the summer, Hookie, when Nathan McSweeney had been picked into the test squad. And he spoke about how they moved in together. They shared a house in Grange. They were supposed to drive here together, but it was COVID, so one flew, and Brendan Doggett flew in, and he had to do everything from finding the house to sorting everything out. And I remember him telling me about how Nathan McSweeney at that point was this young kid, but he still had that responsible sense around him, to the extent, one story he told me was during that period, Brendan's partner moved in, and she was pregnant, and towards the end of her pregnancy, Nathan McSweeney said, look, this is too much for you guys, me being here. And he moved into this tiny unit. And Brendan says he went to visit Nathan McSweeney, and he found him in this tiny unit where he couldn't even keep his refrigerator inside the room. It was that tiny. So, for a first-class cricketer to endure all of that just tells you about him having that something extra in him where people just want to play under him. And you saw that with this team as well. Yes, he might not have finished the season on a high, but yesterday at Rundle Mall when he spoke, or even, when he spoke that evening, famous evening at the Karen Rolton Oval, he's got that air and he's got that presence of someone being in command. So, he would have obviously liked to have contributed a bit more with the bat. You kind of stitched him up as well yesterday on stage when he spoke about 3 for 28, and he was the batter who was leaving at that point. So
I was nervous. How did you feel walking off?
But no, I think it's great signs. And it's unfortunate that he's lost his central contract 1 year in, but you just look at him and you just know he's got it in him to, get it back. And when he does, if he does go back to that test team at a time when Australia, after Pat Cummins, you're not sure who's going to take charge, right? If Pat continues till 2027, even the likes of Travis Head will be in their mid-30s by then. So they might be looking for someone younger. And if McSweeney's scoring the runs that Australia think he can, he could just come back into the side and not long after be captain at the highest level. So he's got it in him. And always it's helpful when you can win these kind of titles on the side.
I'm not sure if you want to delve into the Usman Khawaja debate. He had the blow up with Joe Dawes in public in the lead up to the test. It was a little unbecoming, maybe potentially on both sides. I certainly don't have a strong opinion on it. I do think Usman deserves a lot of credit points for everything that he has done in Australian and Queensland cricket. At the same time, I just want to juxtapose that. And look, Nathan Lyon didn't play the last game for New South Wales either in the Sheffield Shield. That seems to have gone unnoticed. He was also at the Grand Prix. So having said that, Alex Carey clearly just made this unbending commitment to South Australian cricket this year all the way through. He was scoring runs before the Test series. He made huge amounts of runs during the India series, the Border Gavaskar Trophy, and then in Sri Lanka comes back and just continues to dominate. He really wore his South Australian heart on his sleeve all the way through this summer.
I think there's a sense of gratitude from Alex to South Australian cricket, which goes beyond just him being one of their favorite sons. And I guess and you've dealt with him at such a close level, Hookie, over the years, especially when he made that move back here from his. Did you hear that he's played football once upon a time?
It's been mentioned somewhere, I'm sure.
Somewhere in the just hit it. You have to hold the paper under a light, and you can read that bit about that chapter of his life. No, I think for him to kind of lose that bit of his life and come here and to get the opportunity that he did to play first class cricket, and you see, because he's so there are so many sides to Alex Carey, but he kind of becomes almost not defensive. He becomes very bothered when he has to speak about himself. But I think deep inside, he's got that massive gratitude, I've realized, to South Australian cricket, to this team for having given him that second chance in life. And which is why I think he keeps coming back, and whatever role he has to play for this team, in a way, it helps that he's not captain, so he can just come and just be the best wicketkeeper and the best batter in that team, which he continues to be. And especially in the absence of Travis Head, he's really taken it upon his shoulders. And I'm sure there'll be some people saying, "Oh, Travis should have been here," but those are people who don't understand cricket economy at all. It's changed. It's just the reality of the world. And I'm sure Travis, deep inside, would have loved to have been part of that moment, and boy, would he have celebrated. But I think it's just a case of the IPL clashing with the Shield final, because the IPL has started. The last few years, it starts so early. It starts in the end of March, not early April, as it used to be the case. So it's so good to see Alex Carey get his flowers for what he's done for the state. He's carried the state on his shoulders for a long time, and for him to make that match-winning 100 in the second innings just made it extra sweet. It would have been even sweeter if he could have been out there batting and scoring the winning runs potentially. But no, I think it's so good to see him do what he's doing. At the end of what we can clear, I'll stick my neck out and say his best summer of cricket ever, what he's been able to achieve across formats and in Test cricket here and in Sri Lanka.
He's actually not the only Carey to have won a cricket premiership in South Australia this year. This is a little bit of an aside. He has a brother and a sister, an older brother, Adam, and a younger sister, Ashley. Ashley is the captain and wicketkeeper of the Ranella Cricket Club. She wears number 4 on her back, just like her brother, and she led Ranella to the Women's Cricket Premiership this year. So, young Ashley Carey, what a story that is. That, okay, you might have the Sheffield Shield and the Border Gavaskar Trophy and the Warren Muralitaran Trophy, but she's got the Women's Cricket Local Community Club title as well, doing exactly the same thing. Wicket-keeping, batting, wearing number 4.
And this is how small Adelaide and this world of South Australia is, Hookie. Funny you should bring that up because my ex-neighbor or our ex-neighbors in Norwood, so Donna is a huge cricket fan. And I think her daughter-in-law was playing in the opposition when they went down to Ashley Carey's team. And Alex was apparently there watching. So Donna was very embarrassed by her team losing, and because she's a huge Alex Carey fan. So there you go. It's funny, isn't it? So, and I bumped into Adam during the celebrations post play at the Karen Roll to Norwood, as part of the whole familial setup to everything around this team and what was happening that evening.
Yeah. So I played cricket with both Adam and Alex. Alex famously has told the story about his first ever game for Glenelg when I was captain. And of course, he's given me credit for the Johnny Bairstow run out, which I am taking with both hands, Bharat.
I remember being there at this, I think it was in a hotel lobby somewhere in Leeds when he said that story. And then everybody was ringing you up, I remember.
Yes.
So I said, no, I'll let Hookie be, poor thing. And it was early in the morning, I think, or late at night in Australia already.
It was 4 a.m. and my phone is just lit up like a Christmas tree. What is going on? And then, it all occurred to me that, yes, he told that story from his very first game when he was run out exactly the same way as Johnny Bairstow was run out. And I was the one who did happen to tell him, well, it'll teach you to keep your foot behind the crease next time. Just one issue, and I don't know to the extent you want to get involved in this. There was a security issue at the end of the game. We always knew that the fans were going to run on. There was a graphic going up on screen, fines may apply.
Yeah.
It was mentioned to me as the ground announcer, maybe we should be talking about it. I said, I don't think it's going to make much difference. No. There was an unfortunate issue. One fan did run on, try and grab a stump. I think there's always going to be issues when you have fans run onto a venue like that. And the fans running on the venue was just a superb part of it, wasn't it? What did you make of all of that?
No, I think it was inevitable that was going to happen. And, you saw me doing my laps, swanning around in between my commentary stints. And whoever I met leading up to that point, and one question they would ask is, do you think we'll be allowed to storm onto the field? And my answer was, look, I think you should be able to do it because everybody's going to do it. Everybody. And I think that was one aspect of this final because people who were there or who claim to be there anyway at the Adelaide Oval have spoken about and reminisced about that day. And I did I think I went to days calculator as well. 10,588 days ago that was, Hookie.
All right.
Feels like a much longer time than 29 years, doesn't it?
You counted them one by one.
I know. I did. So it's felt like that, I'm sure, for those people who had to listen to those stories about what it was like at the Adelaide Oval. So people were just creating and recreating memories on the ground. So that was going to be unstoppable in terms of security people putting fans in headlocks. I don't know. It's because we see it in grounds all around. I mean, I get it. I mean, people should not be doing it. We see it during the test summer. At least 3 or 4 people across venues do it. But at times, you do. Like I'm no expert, but it can get a bit too physical, and you do wonder. They're just doing their job. The security guards, they are sitting there in the hot sun. It cannot be easy when you suddenly have to sprint onto the ground and pull some idiot down. But you do wonder, because of everything we've seen around the world, headlocks and all of that. It's just bad optics, isn't it? So, but again, I don't think the security guard can be singled out and blamed for it, but it's almost a sad part of these kind of things and why we don't see crowd invasions and of the likes anymore. Why? Probably it was the first crowd invasion of that scale in cricket since 1996. We saw the whole scenes at the SCG 3 years ago, that great moment when Buddy Franklin kicked his 1,000th goal.
Yes.
And we were in Pakistan calling Pat Cummins take the last wicket to win the series. So, it was just, I think, who knows? I mean, look, maybe if we hadn't seen it being captured on camera, we wouldn't even be talking about it. But I don't know how you feel about it. Just when you get into those kind of maneuvers to restrain someone, I don't know. It just has you kind of get worried about it.
I have some empathy for the security staff in those environments. I do think that the field invasion in those rare moments are actually great for the sport.
Yeah.
And it's quite evident to me that this person had no interest in celebrating the moment. He was interested in stealing what is quite frankly a pretty prized possession.
It is.
Also of the understanding, I think, that he was determined to do this because he'd done it in 1996. The exact same act.
Oh, wow.
Now, this is not a young man. This isn't a young kid. This is someone who is probably old enough to have an understanding that this isn't his rightful possession. And I do feel sorry for security guards he's a big boy, and they had to physically restrain him, slow him down, get that stump off him because it's not his.
No.
And yes, you can argue the toss over whether they were a little bit too physical and violent afterwards, but I do have the opinion that if that's your mode in life, to run onto the field to steal something that isn't yours, and you cop a little bit of physicality as a result, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you, I'm afraid.
Completely agreed.
There was a lot of people who said, oh, he was only stealing a stump, leave him alone, that was way too physical. Well, don't steal the stump.
Yeah.
Actually leave that for the people who it should belong to. It should belong to Jason Sanger and Alex Carey and Jake Lehman and Brendan Doggett and Nathan McSweeney and Ryan Harris. There's my six. They're the guys who should have a stump each, So, I don't feel a lot of sympathy, and I do think it is very difficult what those security people are confronted with. It's rare, but when it does occur like that, I think you have to find the person that is doing it all for the wrong reasons, and that guy was on the field for the wrong reasons, and I'm very comfortable with the way that played out. That's my opinion, and if someone thinks that they were too physical, that's okay. They wouldn't have been too physical if he wasn't trying to, take advantage of the moment by stealing something that wasn't his.
Oh, and there were nearly 6,999 more people not doing that. So you're right. I mean, I wasn't aware of the background here, but there's history to it as well. Then definitely there is no sympathy for him or anyone, because that is stolen property, right? That you cannot. Then you are committing a crime. It's one thing to just invade the ground in these kind of extreme situations where, like I said, there were so many other people, including the premier of the state, who was on the ground. I don't know whether he was part of the invasion, but he was there just underneath the balcony. So when that happens, it was always going to happen. But I did get very worried when the stumps went away, because that was my first thought as well. I was like, what about the poor players? I mean, they deserve the stumps. It shouldn't be sold on eBay for, a price. So I'm glad that the stumps were retrieved. And as we now know, they are in rightful hands. So now, because it'll be, look, these scenes were played and replayed, not just in Australia. I think they went viral around the world. So there were so many people in India going, and classic Indian fans going, look how much red ball cricket matters to Australia. No wonder they produce such match winners. Look at us fussing over the IPL. Well, that's a story for another day.
Hey, just while I'm thinking of it, is there a Ranji Trophy team equivalent of what South Australia has done? Regular underachievers who suddenly have bounced up and won a title kind of unexpectedly? Is there a team from the Indian competitions that I guess that reflects?
Well, and since they won it for the first time unexpectedly, this is when I was still in India, they won it a few times after that. And I think they won it this year as well. And Vidarbha, so basically it's a region of Maharashtra where Nagpur is, and we've seen Australia win test matches in Nagpur in the past. So Nagpur is the capital of that region, though it's part of the state of Maharashtra. So they have their own Ranji Trophy teams. Umesh Yadav is probably the most prominent cricketer, the fast bowler to come from there. So they came from nowhere and won the competition. I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, longer. I was 8 or 9 years ago. And that was a shock victory because over there, Mumbai dominate the scene or have dominated the scene for so long. And that was the big transition that I had to make. Having gone from covering Mumbai, a team which at least between 2008 and 2017 won so often, to come to South Australia and be covering a team which hasn't won in such a long time was a big transition. I remember for me as well from a journalistic point of view. But the only difference and I think what made South Australia's victory special was in a 6-team tournament for one of them to have gone this long without a title. And my question though, okay, is what's next for the Sheffield Shield in terms of this was the one narrative that every year, especially in the last few years, we all kind of gravitated towards, didn't we? About, could South Australia win the Shield? Now that they won it, I mean, they'll go on and they'll obviously want to create the legacy like Ryan Harris has said. But when you look at the Sheffield Shield, what's the next big narrative? I mean, I looked it up. Tasmania hasn't won it for 12, 13 years, but, that doesn't mean much. Like, it's not 29. So I do wonder how or what will be the standout narrative for next season, because underdog story always sells well. There'll obviously be players who will be looked at it but from a team perspective, I'm very eagerly looking forward to 25-26 to see what the tournament narrative is.
It's a good question, and without being able to answer what the narrative is going to be, because that will play out organically, and who knows what that is right now. I do think that this outcome of South Australia winning in such a high-profile manner with such an enormous crowd and the redevelopment of Karen Rolton Oval and everything that happened in the way, and I want to get your thoughts very briefly on the Rundle Mall celebration yesterday, which was just incredible. But I do think all of these things give a competition like the Sheffield Shield a bit of a shot in the arm. I mean, it hasn't been a competition that fans have turned out for 30, 40 years. But what it certainly demonstrated to me is that people are still very interested in the outcomes. And I think that will only grow and exacerbate right around Australia, having seen what has happened. I think it's taken some unreasonable hits, the Sheffield Shield competition. We do understand that the BBL has emerged as the way we're going to engage young fans and bring them into the game. But I think to suggest that Cricket Australia has neglected the Sheffield Shield is kind of unreasonable. It's still a 10-match per team competition. It's still home and away. You could easily bring it back to 5 matches, bust it back to some sort of glorified carnival where everyone plays at the same place. It's what they've done with the One Day Cup a couple of times. So I do think it's a competition that has been unnecessarily and unreasonably sort of kicked in the guts a little bit. And I feel like what has happened in the last week here in Adelaide will be some sort of energizer for this form of the game around Australia, at least in the short to mid-term.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think just speaking to Todd Greenberg yesterday, the new CEO of Cricket Australia, who's obviously worked with other codes as well in the past, this is exactly the conversation we were having about what South Australia has proven by dishing out, not just the team, but the state of South Australia, all of us included, is we've almost given Cricket Australia a product and said, look, you can sell this if you sell it the way, build it around a storyline or a narrative. Obviously, this was an easier storyline to build this final around. But it is, if you can, the quality of competition we saw, and at a time when the national team itself is in transition, where you're looking out for all these young players coming through, a young Callum Beitler or a young Liam Scott, or so many young players coming through, Sam Constas, who scored so many runs for New South Wales. I think there is enough in it for them to sell it properly. I think the big next test for the Sheffield Shield, though, would be if and when private investments comes into Australian cricket, which is the BBL, because we are going to get a taster of it in a few months' time in England, where a lot of their counties, like Hampshire, for example, have been bought outright almost by an IPL franchise. So what happens to the county championship in terms of that, with where the 100 fits in, will be, I think, at least a skeleton blueprint for Cricket Australia when inevitably it looks like in a few years' time, who knows when, they will go down that path, and there will be private investment coming into the BBL. Many experts have spoken about it already. And then how the Sheffield Shield gets sold alongside that, I'm really looking forward to seeing. But yeah, I mean, it's such high quality cricket. So if you are into cricket, or if you are introducing your kids into cricket, long form cricket, nothing better than the Sheffield Shield.
Last one, very quickly. Just Bharat, as a South Australian, if you haven't seen it, you need to jump onto ABC iView and see the Australian story that the ABC did with Bharat. It was just such a beautiful story. Back to India, caught up with your mum. Just if you could just give us maybe 30 seconds, just reflecting on the television show. And it hasn't been all smooth sailing. Your journey across to Australia, you've famously called out racism, and I'm so proud of you for doing so. But just very, very briefly, mate, how's life been for you and your family here in South Australia?
I mean, we wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's been we've been so fortunate to be here, for South Australia to accept us the way it has, for Australia to accept us the way it has. And you, like you said, yeah, I mean, obviously there'll always be forces beyond our control who won't be happy with change. That's just the nature of human society, I guess. But no, it was surreal, the Australian story, and the fact that they shot the whole thing for over 8 months, and the fact that Isha got to steal my thunder, and so did the dog. So no, I think even you said that. Most people who watched it have said, and deservedly so. If I wouldn't be here if Isha hadn't really taken the big gamble of coming here by herself and worked odd jobs to finish her masters and then set this all up for me. I just swan myself in, walked in with a backpack and a colorful shirt. But no, and the response has been something else. It's been surreal, to be honest, Hookie. Just wherever I go, people just want a hug. They ask for a hug, and then they introduce themselves. So, if I'm doing that and spreading love wherever I go, I think I've won in life.
Well, my mother was on the receiving end of one of your hugs yesterday, and I know that was a really special moment for her. Bharat, I'm so lucky to have you, mate. I'm so lucky that you've been prepared to give us all of this time to take us through the Sheffield Shield final. I'm so grateful. You made the point at the start. You felt like it was going to be 29 years before you came on. I was prepared to wait until there was a story big enough to bring in the Bharat Sundaresan name. A Sheffield Shield final victory at South Australia is one of those. Mate, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, anytime, Hookie. And I'm sure you won't wait this long for my second appearance on the show.
Bharat Sundaresan, you're a legend. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great chat with Bharat, Ben.
Yeah, just one thing I'd clarify. We spoke on Tuesday. Today is Thursday. In between all of that, the gentleman who was trying to steal the stump at Karen Rolton Oval after the final actually spoke on 5AA yesterday. Didn't give his full name, only gave his first name out. But he did admit, as we were sort of referencing in our chat, that he was trying to steal a stump to marry up with the one that he stole 29 years ago. So that was one thing that I'd sort of mooted as possible, and I don't think Bharat was aware of it, but that's now absolutely 100% confirmed by the gentleman concerned himself.
Hashtag confession. I did notice we drove past the Karen Rolton Oval as everybody was exiting, and as we were at the lights, there was a whole lot of these Saka signs heading out, and I did see that a few of them had been taken to the presentation in Rundle Mall and to get signatures.
The communications team, and in particular the social media guys, there's some really witty lads and women in that, and they did put up a social media post which said something along the lines of, has anyone seen our new site? Never mind. Don't worry about it. They've all been knocked off. That's one thing that I didn't get into with Bharat, and that's going to be, we were talking about, and you and I have talked about it as well, Wallace, the purpose of the Sheffield Shield final. I think it is a wonderful game. It was a great game of cricket, so it's difficult to argue in the aftermath of that as whether it's got its purpose. I hate to think what the ultimate invoice is to put that game on. When you think about the amount spent to turn Karen Rolton Oval into a venue that could host it, all of the trappings that goes into putting that together, you're paying the players, and it was free entry. I'm aware of some of the numbers. I won't share them with you, but they are eye-watering. And I think that will be another question about whether it is justifiable to host a Sheffield Shield final long term going on.
Well, one would hope that CA Cricket Australia has contributed to that.
Well, I mean, Cricket Australia is constrained by its own budget. And yeah, if you're going to ask for inordinate amounts of money, and I'm not just talking South Australia here, any state to be able to put it on at an alternative venue because you can't get access to your primary venue. In particular, when you're opening up the gates and letting people in for free, that gets someone's got to foot the bill at some point. And I'm not sure who that's going to be, but I can assure you there is a big unbudgeted expense that will be sitting there right now.
And 2 trophies.
And 2 trophies. And didn't we have fun raising them in Rundle Mall on Monday?
Yeah, it looks sensational. Hookie, great to catch up. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Excellent, mate.